And what binds us together is a single core belief. We all believe in the transformative power of culture. We know that culture transforms cities, neighbourhoods, and people's lives. We know that culture gives our cities identity and character in an increasingly globalised world. It's boosting our economies, creating the jobs of the future, and giving tourists a reason to visit. In this digital world where we all stare at our screens and algorithms seem to be in charge of our lives, we know that going to a concert or a festival gives us a vital and shared human connection. Culture is making our citizens healthier and happier, and it has the power to turn us into critical and curious thinkers, capable of imagining better futures. Importantly, culture is not simply something to be enjoyed by those that can afford it. At the World Cities Culture Forum, we all believe that culture is not a privilege, but a right, a basic human right. But the good news is we're not alone in this. Now there are many others who know this too. And in our cities, we are witnessing a major new trend. We're seeing culture completely repositioned. No longer a nice to have, it's now a must have. Culture has gone from a niche idea to a mainstream one. It's no longer isolated in an arts team with a small budget and a few staff. Culture is now hardwired into city policy. We see culture in economics, in planning, in regeneration, in health, and in tourism policy.
In San Francisco alone, about $10 billion US dollars is spent annually by tourists here, and 62% of that spending is done by visitors from outside of the United States. So our international market is really important, and there's no message more important than the culture of San Francisco. What makes this really small, unique little part of North America unique is our culture, is our DNA, why we're different from everywhere else. While today we're the center of resistance in the United States to a lot of policies that you may be hear coming out of DC, or 60 years ago when the beatniks descended on North Beach and write poetry to talk about their lives, or 51 years ago when the Summer of Love was celebrated and 100,000 young people protesting the war and changing lives came to San Francisco and moved here because it was part of the culture. Or 40 years ago when Harvey Milk invited young gay and lesbian people from around the world to come out to San Francisco. We've always been different, and we're proud of that difference. And our culture makes us a place that we can share with the world and make it a better place for us to be because we learn from other cultures, and a better place for us to be in harmony with the world.
My role today is to both welcome you, but also to give you an overview of San Francisco's cultural policy. I think the best way to do that is to highlight a little bit about San Francisco's history and our values, and that paints a picture of how we define cultural policy here in the city. So, as Joe mentioned, in my role as Director of Cultural Affairs, I oversee the San Francisco Arts Commission. We're very fortunate that as a city, we actually have 5 municipal departments dedicated to arts and culture. And we are one of them with a charter authority that dates back to 1932. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge through a new tradition we've adopted, which is to open all of our public addresses with an acknowledgement that San Francisco occupies traditional Ramaytush Ohlone land. We do this to pay respect to local indigenous communities and people who have made our community great, and because we believe that in order to advance social and racial equity, we must first recognize and claim the wrongs of our past.
In art making or any marriage, at some point you realize that the honeymoon is over. And it means that at that point we face self-reform. That we recognize, because of that relationship, our shortcomings and how we have to fortify ourselves and do some adjustments. When that comes, and the sugar of a relationship disappears for a moment, it calls for us to be strong. Now, often, the human being, when that happens in a relationship, will run away because they want the perpetual honeymoon. But it doesn't work. We have to come to that point where there is that crisis and we face ourselves and we have to transform. And that's where we are now in this world. There is a saying that to paint the horse, you have to become the horse. So this is a selfless act. It means that if you're going to paint the horse, you can't do a knockoff, you can't do a cloning, you can't do an imitation, and most importantly, you can't do an appearance of the horse. You have to grasp its essence. Now, interesting, and it may be a difficult thing for people to hear, but in the art process, when you have an object and you have an obsession for that object, you have to create a burning devotion that shortens the space between you and the object until you become one. And there's a disappearing act. Now, what is that about? That is understanding the horse. Now, we can change horse to any word where there's a problem, or there's a solution to be solved, or there's a discovery. And so we can't work at it externally. We have to get inside of it, put aside even our brilliance to become what we're studying or what we want to solve or what we want to become. And that is devotion.
We at YBCA surveyed about 1,500 San Francisco residents, Bay Area residents just recently, and they had a lot to say about what they think art and creativity can do. 83% agree creativity is important to imagining the future. 68% agree that art and creativity can inspire people to improve society and the world. 92% agree art and creativity will play an increasingly critical role in making our communities better. At YBCA, we listened to that. We are a public square. We help drive the culture of our city. And our mission is to generate culture that moves people, because we believe that it is culture that precedes change. Any lasting change is preceded by significant cultural movement, people igniting the public imagination, and people's hearts and minds are changed, and we move forward. So what happens if every organization of any shape and any size across this planet thinks of its mission to be about cultural shift and to be the creative home, not only for artists, but for people of all kinds who want to be part of making a better future? What better place than an art center for change to happen?